Everyone to DRJ's webinar series. I am Bob Arnold, President here at Disaster Recovery Journal. Today's sponsor is Recovery Point, and the topic is Ransomware Protection, how to recover your business. Before we get started, I want to review a couple housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. This recording will be shared with everyone via an automated email tomorrow. Attendees are also in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask any questions, please use the question panel you locate on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll answer as many of these questions as possible at the end of the session. And now back to today's topic on ransomware protection. Our presenters today are Jeff Judy and Jay Holler. Jeff has more than 2 decades of experience in system architecture and administration, with a particular focus on virtualized solutions. He designed, built, and deployed Recovery Point's cloud environments, including its FedRAMP Ready Gov cloud service, and has extensive experience with a broad range of storage replication and backup technologies. Prior to Recovery Point, Jeff held a number of senior positions with Fortune 500 integrators and various global consulting firms. He has experience deploying new data centers and leading system engineering teams, and is a VMware certified professional. Jay is the president of Touchstone Disaster Recovery, where he helps businesses create highly available business environments through adherence to a proprietary business availability lifecycle. Jay and Touchstone have a long-time strategic business partnership with the MVP Group, who provides business continuity and disaster recovery solutions to their clients. And prior to starting Touchstone Disaster Recovery, Jay spent 10 years developing disaster recovery solutions for both SunGard and Comdisco customers. And with no further introduction, I'd like to welcome and turn the mic over now to Jeff.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for the introduction. All right, let's get started. Jay, how are you feeling about a deep dive today into how Recovery Point and MVP Group can help clients get back to running their business after getting hit with a ransomware attack?
Hey, Jeff, thanks. Really looking forward to this, and hoping we can impart some wisdom on the many years of experience in helping folks do this. So let's jump in. Let's get started.
Okay, great. All right, our objective today is to provide you with some strategies around building a reliable ransomware protection and creating a stronger digital resilience. So here's our agenda today. First, we're going to talk about the NIST cybersecurity framework and how it translates to Recovery Point's disaster recovery services. Then Jay's going to talk a little bit about the business resiliency lifecycle and how it can help in planning your defense strategy. And then I'll break down the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. And finally, we'll take some questions. So Jay, let's talk about digital resilience. Can you tell us what MVP Group is recommending?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all know the main objective with any disaster is to recover. Very simple, right? We can all agree that data is core to any company, and it's critical. And if you don't have access to it, if you don't have access to your order processes, your clients, your vendors, you quickly realize how important that data is, more so when you're locked out and you can't even access email, can't access your laptops or even your mobile devices. And if you can't recover, I think we all know what the result of that could possibly be, and that is ultimately going out of business. So what you really need is a good comprehensive approach to digital resilience. Ransomware is getting all the attention today, which is what we'll talk about in some detail. But digital resilience is not just about recovering from ransomware. It's about having a plan in place so you know how to recover, bounce back when something happens. So the goal today is to show ways that you can strengthen your digital resilience, and we'll do that through Jeff, obviously what you just mentioned, and then digging into our life cycle. So yeah, that's kind of where we're going to go.
Great, thanks, Jay. Yeah, and I completely agree. With those points, like having a recovery plan and a good backup of your data is foundational to recovering from any type of attack. So, Gartner's reporting that by 2025, at least about 75% of IT organizations will face one or more attacks. And personally, we've seen a dramatic increase in ransomware attacks over the last 2 years, just in the news and with our client base. But so it's growing fast. I mean, we've seen things this past year like the Kessia remote management attack, which happened over July 4th weekend. There was the Colonial Pipeline attack, and then the meat producers JBS Foods. So ransomware is one of the most dangerous threats to organizations today. But the attack, it doesn't just have to occur in a single event or in one day. A lot of organizations think that ransomware can be an isolated event, but the reality is that ransomware is deployed as part of a larger attack. These attacks usually consist of some type of network penetration, and that can involve where your end users click on an email or a link in an email, and it launches some remote malware, gets loaded on their endpoint systems. And from that point, the attackers will start to steal the credentials and begin to harvest your accounts on your network. They'll crawl through the network and take control of your critical administrative accounts until they can gain access to like Active Directory, DNS. They'll target your storage, admin consoles, and other key systems. So, once the attackers have gained a foothold in your network, they begin to target the backup infrastructure first. They can do things like turn off your backup jobs or modify the jobs, changing your retention policies. And also, once they have access to your backup admin console, it gives them a sort of a roadmap to where all the sensitive data is stored. So, in many cases, the goal of the attack, it's not just to encrypt your data. They want to steal it for future criminal activities, such as charging you a ransom to return the data, or they'll threaten you that they'll share the sensitive data publicly unless you were to continue to pay up. And after these attacks have snooped around in your infrastructure enough, they'll start to cripple services until they can launch the ransomware attack. Even if you had a decent intrusion protection or threat protection system in place, and you can stop the data theft, they could still kick off a denial of service attack to cripple your network. And like I said, these things don't happen in just a day. It happens over time. It can take weeks or months for an attacker to accomplish. And it's going to leave malware deeply embedded in the systems throughout your business. We call this dwell time. And this is where an attacker, they've breached your systems, but they lay dormant until the right time comes to attack. So, like the Kessia attack, they waited till the July 4th holiday weekend to launch that when everybody was out on holiday. When their work is complete and the ransomware is deployed, everything's encrypted, your critical data is encrypted, including your backup restores. There's not much you can do. So these devastating attacks of this nature are becoming more frequent. It can take you days or weeks to recover, and sometimes a full recovery may not be possible at all.
It seems like, Jeff, that organizations are maybe quick to pay a ransom to get their data back. Maybe that's the right path. Maybe that's the way to go.
Well, that's true, Jay. I mean, that might work. You might be able to get your data back, but there's no guarantee that they're going to return your data when you pay them. And it also shows these bad actors that you're willing to pay up, and you will get hit again and again.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah. So, once you've been attacked, your data center becomes sort of a crime scene. Think of it as like virtual police tape ropes off your area. You can't touch it anymore. You can't access your servers, your email, maybe even your phone systems are crippled or compromised. You can't use any of that infrastructure any longer as it's considered completely compromised. So you need a backup that can be cleared fast enough, and then you need new target compute and storage and network resources to restore to. That's where Recovery Point Systems excels. That's where we excel we're a valuable partner. And we can provide you with an alternate disaster recovery facility and the resources to restore your business. So a ransomware event's a crisis, and you really should have a partner that can provide you with the best digital resilience. Okay, so I'm going to get into the NIST cybersecurity framework here. And this just kind of lays out some of the steps that you can take to better protect your business against these types of attacks. The 5 functions of the framework are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And we'll break these down in a minute. The framework was developed to help organizations understand their cybersecurity risks, and that's threats, vulnerabilities, impacts to your business, and how to reduce these risks and help you to respond and recover from these cyber incidents. Along with that, it brings along, or it helps you build a common language for all of your teams. So, in today's world, the InfoSec teams are playing a much larger role in your architecture, your infrastructure, technology direction, your digital resilience development, your vendor recommendations. So having a common language in place among your operations teams, your InfoSec teams, and all the stakeholders helps all teams to build an understanding, which helps to build a better defense. So as I said, there's 5 core functions that make up the framework. It's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So identify is where you're going to develop an understanding of your risks. And you can start with something simple like having an accurate asset database. So if you just simply know what systems you have running out in your data center, it's going to help you to begin to set up proper vulnerability scanning. Also, once you have an accurate list of these assets, you can assign a RTO and RPO to each system based on the level of impact to the business should that system be lost. So an RTO is your recovery time objective. That's the amount of time it takes to recover a system. And RPO is the recovery point objective, or the amount of data that you're willing to lose between a backup or a replication interval. So here at Recovery Point, we define RTO and RPOs into tiers for recovery, which maps to various levels of service that we offer. So a tier 1 system might need to be recovered in 4 hours or less, and it can only sustain 4 hours or less of data loss. A tier 2 would be 4 to 8 hours, tier 3, 8 to 24 hours, and so on. Now, on a larger scale, and to better understand the risks to your business, you should consider conducting a business impact analysis with a third party. So business impact analysis can go, or they will go into great detail about your systems, applications, your personnel, the type of training everyone's received, documentation, and it gives you a holistic view of the risks to the business. So MVP Group is our trusted partner, and they will conduct a business impact analysis. And Dave's going to talk about that in a minute, about how you can map your applications to your supporting systems. The second function in the NIST cybersecurity framework is protect. This helps you develop safeguards to ensure your business services continue to function. RPS uses your tiering. So based on your RTO and RPO assignments, we're going to make recommendations on disaster recovery services that are going to meet your requirements. We like to blend recovery services like replication of systems and backup of systems, and it's going to create a highly efficient and effective and a budget-friendly disaster recovery solution. We offer a range of recovery capabilities such as continuous data protection that brings you down into maybe sub 5 minutes of RPO, of recovery point objective, snapshot replicas, offsite backups, and archive tape vaulting. And I mean, yes, tape is not dead. It's a highly effective means of air gapping your data when it's vaulted. The third function here for the framework is detect. So detect is going to help you to develop ways to identify cybersecurity events. We recommend that you periodically restore your local backups and run malware scans using threat protection tools. Here at Recovery Point, we use a lot of PowerShell to orchestrate full system and application recovery for several of our clients. It's a fully managed recovery service called BPR. That stands for Business Process Resilience. So we already have the code base to interface with MVP Group software. And we can assist you with setting up the PowerShell code to facilitate automating this periodic recovery and scans. The fourth function is respond. Response planning is critical. And to loosely quote Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get hit. So having a well-written, documented, and verified response plan is a really good idea. Because when an attack occurs, it's a crisis. And if you don't have a plan, your teams, your people begin to scramble. They will make costly mistakes. They may lose valuable forensics data. And you're going to waste valuable minutes that are needed to bring the business back online. So response planning is really critical. And finally, the fifth function is recover. This is where recovery point is going to come in and really help you out. So you do need a test plan, or you need to test your replication and your backups and your recovery plans to make sure that they work. This is core to what we deliver. Our DRAS services are ranked very highly by Gartner, and our BPR service, which I mentioned a minute ago, will facilitate a fully managed and orchestrated recovery. The service is comprised of recovery points, DR planning, structured framework, professional services. We use as much automation as possible, and frequent runbook validation testing. All right, I know that was a lot, but to reiterate, the cybersecurity framework is identify. So identify your risk. Start with something simple like having an accurate asset database to work against for vulnerability scanning. Protect, make sure you have replicas and backups defined based on your RTOs and RPOs. Detect, run malware scans against your backups for detection of any anomaly. Have a response plan. Respond would be having a verified response plan, and recover. So test frequently that your response plan is working, that your backups are valid. You can use our BPR fully managed recovery service, which you let us shoulder the DR recovery work for you, and you can focus on your critical business functions. All right. So we just talked about how to plan, respond, and recover from an attack using the NIST cybersecurity framework. But what are some strategies that you can use to stop or slow down an attack? Jay, I know you're releasing a book on this topic with some recommendations for resiliency lifecycle planning. Would you mind highlighting the phases for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. And so our resiliency lifecycle, which we'll step through here in a moment, is based on hands-on experience supporting actual disasters, actual testing, and working with different clients in just about every market. And one of the things that we look to do is operationalize, if you will, the what we'll call traditional recovery processes. That means building them into everyday process and procedures. And one of the things we recommend to our clients is in maintaining this life cycle that we've developed over the years is basically having a place to store all the data and metrics in a common place, a common IT service operation management system. That might be Archer or ServiceNow, Ivanti, you name it. We'll touch on that a little bit more as we get into the governance phase. But we're going to walk through the life cycle, and really this will be through the lens of resiliency. And I think that the number one concern as we step into the first and foundational piece, the business impact analysis, one of the big concerns is loss of revenue in a cyber attack. And so how do you understand that loss of revenue? And Jeff mentioned earlier the BIA process. So the business impact analysis process basically is going to help identify and tier your critical business services and applications. And sometimes you look at it at a business service level or an application service level or the individual application level, but the goal is always the same. Determine your RTO and RPO, which Jeff defined earlier, and determine the cost of downtime. And one of the things that we do is we do our scoring and data gathering and begin to help create these tiers is the importance of understanding the cost of downtime, the cost metric then that you develop as part of the BIA is important for future investment offset, i.e. when you get to the strategy piece, which we'll talk to in a minute. So you're understanding the cost of downtime, RTO and RPO requirements, and you're starting to understand the application dependencies and interdependencies. And the application mapping process, which we'll hit in a moment, takes that to a whole nother level. And in our life cycle, we break them out separately because of the critical importance of application dependency mapping as we see it. But as you're looking at and starting to prioritize your applications, one of the things that we spend quite a bit of time in is understanding what and where your cloud and SaaS applications fit, because they have to be considered and they have to be looked at against the requirements that the business have for RTO and RPO. So we do significant auditing on cloud and SaaS providers to understand and ensure that they can meet the business requirements that the organization has. The assumption often and wrongly is, hey, they got us covered and we have an SLA, but we go deeper than that. And I think it's important to understand what's their resiliency strategy, and by the way, does it meet yours? So that's a key part of the BIA as well. And so this BIA piece fits into NIST 834, which, as Jeff talked about the NIST framework, it's the identify function of that framework. And we recently got asked and got involved in an audit that we did a BIA for 700 applications for a client. And because we did that, we were able to respond efficiently and effectively to the audit request. So critical foundational component to your overall business resiliency program. So the next phase is the application dependency mapping. And frankly, it might be the most challenging of all the phases because you're trying to understand not only upstream and downstream dependencies for a particular app, but the more difficult part is understanding that supporting infrastructure. And one of the things that we believe, and often we use the word availability even with resiliency, is the idea that you want to be able to move an application for any reason at any time, individually. It's not, hey, we're going to fail over this entire stack or we're going to fail over the entire data center. It's important to identify the components that support an individual application and build that into your resiliency program. So what you're doing is you're initially identifying some of those dependencies in the BIA process, but now what you're really doing is you're solidifying the single application resiliency and application mapping. And again, this is such a difficult thing because often there are tools that are run, and what we see, and having been involved in most of those use of those tools, is especially if you have a more complex environment, i.e. multiple platforms, if you have mainframe ZOS or you have some IBM P or I, often when you run those discovery tools and that are available, there are these black boxes that pop up because there's there isn't the ability to dig into some of those other platforms. So at the end of the day, we see it as a more manual process, albeit painful, but a critical one where you really need to sit around with the stakeholders that own those business processes and applications and walk through the upstream, downstream dependencies and the supporting infrastructure. Painful, yes. Important, yes. So that's application mapping as we see it in the overall strategy and trying to protect yourself from a cyber attack or any event. So the next piece is strategy. And this is where you determine and develop and implement your resiliency strategy. That's where Recovery Point comes in. And one of the unique things about Recovery Point is the multi-platform support that they offer. So multi-platform, again, ZOS, P&I, as well as the Windows Linux environment. And so this is where you develop your replication strategy and your backup strategy. And here is where we're going to get into a little bit deeper into the backup and air gap strategy that Jeff touched on, the 32110. And this is the stage where you basically look at your business requirements that were determined during the business impact and application dependency phases, and start determining what your backup and replication strategies are. What you really want to do there is look at those strategies that are going to be sure to meet those business requirements. When it comes to backups, the key part in where a cyber attack might veer left from a traditional disaster recovery is you really want to have that offline immutable air gap copy. And that can be on S3 storage. It can be, as Jeff mentioned, on tape. And tape isn't dead. And we're starting to see more and more of that, because you do want that air gap copy. You want that off-network copy, and you need to develop a strategy to make that a reality. There's also the ability to do snapshots, and I believe it's Pure Storage that has a cool feature. They're not the only ones that allow you to do safe mode snapshots, which in essence are protection from your volumes being deleted or altered for a set period of time. So that's an immutable copy. And so this strategy piece is part of the protect and recovery function that Jeff brought out in the NIST framework. Part of what you start here as well is your automation and orchestration strategy. Jeff mentioned this as well. You can start with PowerShell as a terrific, inexpensive automation tool for your recovery strategy, and then move to orchestration tools like BPR. But all that is done in the recovery strategy portion of the life cycle. The next phase is our plans and procedures. And really there's two categories of plans as we see them. You have your business plans, which are your emergency response, your crisis plans, and your business continuity plans. And yes, by the way, IT does need a separate business continuity plan. Yes, they're responsible primarily for the disaster recovery plan, but they need a BCP as well. So we have our business plans, and then we have technology plans, which are your traditional resiliency plans, your DR, disaster recovery, your DRP. And where probably we differ is in developing the plans is probably a couple areas. One, we are of the belief that the plan has to be short and usable. That means a step-by-step checklist that a non-expert can execute. That means that those step-by-step checklists that are followed are typically procedures. And those procedures are potentially kept not in the disaster recovery plan, but we are big on links, and having links to not only other plans like a cyber plan or a BCP, because it's all part of the program. So each and every plan has a link to other plans, but we also, as part of the checklist, there are links to the procedures. So that means that step 3 in our checklist might be a link to Active Directory restoration procedures. So we use links as part of the checklist, live links for instant click and view of procedures. The other thing we do is to shorten up and make the plans usable is we use links to HR contact lists. So no more list and long list of department names and phone numbers, but it's now a quarterly list that HR basically creates a report, puts it and locks it down in SharePoint, so it's accessible only to certain people. Now there's a link in the plan to an updated department list that doesn't have to be maintained separately by the departments themselves and the groups themselves. So very big on links, very big on short executable plans. We also believe that a key piece of your plan, and especially when it comes to your disaster recovery plan, is the idea of triggers. And there need to be triggers that say this is more than an incident, it's more than a major incident, we may need to begin failover. We may need to declare a disaster. The triggers are such that it's a guide, and we've seen this many times with clients where it's, do we need to declare now? Have we exhausted all options? Triggers help in that decision making. And that might be if X number of users are affected, or if X amount of our critical applications are down. You'll never capture everything, but at least it helps in the midst of a potential event. So the plans and procedures, procedures being, we believe, the most important part, fit into the respond and recovery functions of the NIST framework. And the second to last piece we want to hit is testing. And Jeff hit on the importance of testing. And there's two types of tests, we believe: tabletop and technology testing. Tabletop testing, we see huge value in. That is a gathering of stakeholders in the walkthrough of a crisis plan, basically walking through to look for gaps and issues. Or to get more sophisticated, many of you have created scenarios that then are used to walk through the plans that you have, business plans. The tabletop testing is much less time consuming, and it really allows you to do a deep dive walkthrough of your plans and procedures. One of the things that we do as we're on a quarterly basis doing our reviews is to get multiple infrastructure application stakeholders and owners in the same room and walk through the plan and procedures to try to find gaps, to make sure that nothing's changed. So tabletops, certainly technology testing, DR testing, the importance to restore from multiple media, whether it's the replication copy, a virtual tape copy, or a physical tape copy. We did a recent test where we had to restore some files from Commvault, and it took us 38 hours, and the RTO for that particular application component was 8 hours. So one of the key things that you need to do is not only restore and test from multiple types of media, but you need to be able to track that against actuals. So basically in testing, you're doing and coming up with a metric called recovery time achieved, and you measure that to the recovery time objective that the business has. And the way we do it is we track it down to the minute, and so we can say by application that we either exceeded the RTO by X number of hours or did better than the RTO by X number of hours. And that's important from an audit perspective and a business perspective. So there's no question, as Jeff was mentioning earlier, not only that you know what your RTO and RPO being the objectives are, but you also know from a test perspective how you've done against those. And so you take what you learned from a test and you do remediation against that, and that helps with improving the RTO and RPO that the business requires. So this particular aspect of the life cycle matches up with the identify, respond, and recover functions of the NIST framework. This is the 0 in 32110 that Jeff's going to talk about in a moment. And one of the things that we're working on now from a test perspective, which is with our clients, which is challenging, is how do you test with a cloud and SaaS provider? So we're working with some key key vendors on creating a sandbox for testing. It's not easy, but we believe that, you know, if there's an application that requires email addresses, for example, as part of a CRM system, you need to be able to test that with a vendor and have them create a test sandbox for you a couple times a year. So that's one of the things we've been attacking pretty hard this year overall from a testing perspective. The last piece is our governance. And governance really wraps around this entire process and operationalizes each one of these phases that we've talked about. And one of the key things that we do here is we have a scorecard that measures the critical components of each one of these phases and shows not only where improvement is needed, but how we're going to improve. So a scorecard is so important, and it helps with audit and compliance. It helps knowing, helping the organization know where they are in their resiliency life cycle and their overall business continuity program. And part of governance is change management and making sure that production changes are captured in your backup environment, in your DR environment. So change management, very much a big part of governance. And the goal here in governance also is to drive this culture of resiliency, if you will. So that's the last piece, the governance piece. And just from a digital resiliency perspective, we believe that, you know, the governance and the constant auditing of your company's critical business process and DR plans, overall plans, are going to help you uncover potential risks that could jeopardize your data. The life cycle that we've laid out here is absolutely going to help protect you against any threats. And lastly, the life cycle is going to help lower your risk of being compromised in an attack. So that's the last of the business continuity life cycle. We look forward to some questions. Jeff, I will flip it back to you to jump into the 3-2-1-1-0 process for us.
Thank you, Jay. The strategy, the resiliency strategy, and recovery point systems and MVP group, it's all we do. I mean, we eat, sleep, and drink disaster recovery services. So we can partner with you and help you along this path and make the right recommendations for your DR strategy. So right now, or the last thing we're going to talk about here is we're going to dive into one of the strategies that we like to recommend. And it's called the 3-2-1-1-0 rule, and it's to help you create ultra resilient backups. So the breakdown here and how it maps to, I'm going to map it to our Veeam Cloud Connect services, would be you need to have 3 copies of data, and it can break out in various ways, but let's say you have one of your copies would be your actual production data, and then you have keep a backup set on site, and then you send us, Recovery Point, a copy of your backup. So use Recovery Point's Veeam Cloud Connect services, and you can send us copies of your backups and replicas. You need to keep 2 different types of media. So you want to keep one backup on disk for a faster recovery, and then keep another copy on tape or out on S3 object storage. You can use a combination of our Veeam Cloud Connect service with tape out services that we offer, or you can use our S3 compatible object storage with immutability for the retention policies. You need to keep 1 copy off-site. Let's just say, as an example, your data center has an electrical fire or a sprinkler malfunction. Your data center is gone, and along with all your production data and that backup data set. You would still have a lifeline if you had a backup copy sitting off-site. So if you're using our Veeam Cloud Connect services, then we have you covered, because we'll be storing a copy of your backup data off-site. And you can also use us for failover and recovery services. So we will provision the target recovery compute, storage, and networking to bring your business back online. Let's see, keep 1 copy air-gapped. And this is very, very important, or immutable. So you can write a backup copy out to tape or to S3 object storage with immutability. And of course, if you're using tape, make sure that you eject that tape from the library where the attackers will be able to overwrite the data that's still accessible to the tape drive. And again, we'll facilitate air gapping with our VCC with tape out and with the S3 compatible object storage with mutability services that we offer. And finally, zero error. So you must test your backups frequently, as Jay was talking about, to validate the data integrity and to confirm that your business critical data is recoverable. So you don't really know if your backups are good unless you run a recovery. And you can recover using our hot-site cloud services, or you can let us handle the DR tasks with our business process resilience service to validate your data and the recovery tasks in sequence. All right, just to recap what we've covered today, we talked about the NIST cybersecurity framework and the 5 functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Jay highlighted how the resiliency lifecycle can help in planning your defense. And then we just discussed the 3-2-1-1-0 rule to create ultra resilient backups with Recovery Point Systems Veeam Cloud Connect services. Jay, thanks for sharing today and your MVP group perspective, and thank you all for joining. I hope this information was helpful, and I think we'll be ready for some questions.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, Jeff and Jay. And if, again, you do have any questions for our speakers here today, you can locate the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If we don't get to your questions, or if the question is a little too in-depth, we will follow up with everyone after the webinar's ended. And so several have come in here. Let me jump right into the first question. What are some strategies for threat protection?
Thanks. I'll take that. So let's see, strategies for threat protection. You know, we've covered it from a DR perspective, so really to be able to recover when an attack occurs. But there's other things that you can do to slow down the attack or maybe even stop the attack. So I mean, some recommendations are really, you have to have things like advanced threat protection tools. Some vendors that are good at that would be companies like SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Wildfire, Cisco's Firepower Threat Defense. Those are just all good to give you some threat protection. You should segment your backups to an alternate domain. So, you know, over time, over years or whatever, you have an Active Directory authentication domain that starts to get bloated with different service accounts and user accounts, and it becomes vulnerable to the harvesting of credentials. You might not even be aware that that's happening to you, but if your backups are on a segmented authentication domain using Active Directory, it's gonna add another layer of security and access and slow down that attacker. Some other things that we like to recommend are using security templates. We like the Center for Internet Security, CIS benchmark templates. They come out hard and they support major vendors like Microsoft and Red Hat and VMware. Use a zero trust model. So you want to make sure that your accounts that you're creating are built or only allowed to access the particular system that they're assigned to access. You know, don't give everybody a domain admin account type setup. Thanks, Bob.
All right, next question. Can you provide some guidance on how to best test software as a service applications?
It's a little tricky. So you know, that is the trend in the world today. So you need to work with those vendors, as Jay was alluding to, about having them be able to give you a sandbox, you know, or some type of test platform that you can test against when you're running your DR tests and running those plans. So I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, we will work with like Azure services. So if you're using Azure Active Directory services, you know, you can still reach out to those domain controllers to do authentication testing, but you don't want to have your DR test systems communicating back to those production domain controllers. So you need to create snapshots and then add those into the isolated DR networks.
All right, what happens if all your backups are compromised?
Well, So, I mean, in that scenario, you're in a tough spot because your backups, you can't recover your business data. The attackers are probably asking for a ransom. So, I mean, really, what's going to happen there, and really what's going to happen no matter what, is you're going to call your insurance company, you're going to call your legal team. There's going to be a forensics team or consulting team, maybe if you don't have one, that's going to come in, and they're going to start to scan your systems. You're going to isolate everything. Basically, just assess how bad the damage is and see how much data you can recover. You know, maybe you can get 80% of your data back. You know, maybe you can recover these backups and clean them to get the data before the encryption occurred. But you know, at some point you might have to negotiate, and knowing how much data you are able to recover is a kind of a bargaining chip, where they might want, I don't know, $1 million, and you can say, well, the data I need back is only worth $100,000. So tell them no, kind of thing.
All right, next question. What, with data set sizes reaching terabytes and petabytes, could you please share tips on how to manage the duration of backup times, which could possibly take weeks to complete?
So, I mean, it's going to come down to your business risk. I mean, so you're going to know that, hey, it could take me a week to recover a petabyte of backups. You gotta relay that to your business to be like, this is a potential risk. If you want all of this data recovered, you want the business services back online. Right now, with the technology that I have, it will take a week. You know, and then the business can decide if that's an acceptable risk, or they can say, no way, we need it back in a day. Let's put everything on flash storage, or let's adjust how we're creating backups and tier off what's most critical and that we want recovered and replicate that. So it's just assessing the risk that you have based on the data sets you're trying to recover. And then once you know that, you can adjust, you can forecast for budget for next year or whatever to say, hey, we really need to improve the recovery time of these business critical applications. And you can make the investment.
And that's where, you know, as we were talking about earlier, the importance of the business impact and understanding what that cost of downtime is, and really being able to come up with that metric. And you know, we work with a client that we know it's $8,000 a minute when their key application is down, so that adds up pretty quick, and that helps in an investment to improve. So
all right, next question. Does the Recovery Point MVP solution support large heterogeneous environments and legacy systems?
Yes, that's actually where we excel. We're one of the few vendors that can support a heterogeneous mix, like Jay was saying about mainframe, I-Series, P-Series, your AS400 systems, in addition to your x86, your Windows and Linux systems. So that's really where we excel, is recovery of those heterogeneous environments.
We do quite a bit of strategy work, and as soon as you introduce those other platforms, the list of providers gets much shorter, and the list of providers who are really good even gets shorter. So yeah, I completely agree on the Recovery Point.
All right, what is the impact on the RTO and RPO after a ransomware attack?
Your RPO, it's really not going to change much. It's not going to change at all. I guess it's going to be as good as your last backup that you can recover to. So that would be your recovery point objective. Now the recovery time objective, it could change drastically, and it really goes back to what I was saying earlier about having a good plan in place, and you know what Jay was saying about testing that plan, having a tabletop exercise and a technology test plan. Because if you don't have those things and they're not tested frequently and validated, you know, you might not have thought about, like, what if my phone systems are down, and then the attack happens and your phone systems are down. Nobody can talk to each other, and you know, then nothing gets done. Like, communications are down basically. So having a well thought out plan and it's tested and people know what to do in the event of something like this happening is going to help to really boost your recovery time objective. Because, you know, from a technology perspective, we can fail systems over, we can run full recovery scripts every day. You know, we do that for a lot of clients, but I mean, you know, the systems might be compromised. You might not people might not be able to communicate with what has happened and what should be isolated versus what can continue. And so yeah, having a plan in place is critical for your RTO.
All right, any issues to focus on with hybrid cloud or in-house environments?
Hybrid cloud. So we're talking about like multi-cloud, right? That's just today's world. A lot of people have some on-premise stuff. They've got stuff out in Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud, and the landscape is shifting. So you gotta plan for that, right? You have to be able to know where your critical data sits. Make sure that it's backed up. I mean, the same kind of testing and planning is just foundational, wherever the data sits, but having the right technology and the right partners to be able to navigate that landscape, I guess to say, it would be critical. So I mean, that's another area we can help you be able to recover, like failover between different availability zones, or going from on-prem back over to our data centers and recovery point. You know, and then you bring in MVP group, they'll be able to help lay out the business impact to that kind of multi-cloud landscape, and you know, help you plan for like that kind of recovery.
All right, if we're in the midst of recovering from ransomware, how do we determine that the systems are not corrupted?
So like I said, you can, and you should scan for malware on your backups. If you're keeping a local copy, you can automate that process. I'm just highlighting Veeam, but there's many tools, different tools out there. But I mean, Veeam's a good one. They have a feature inside their technology is called Sure Backup. So you can set up schedules to bring your systems, your backups online, and then run through recovery procedures. You can also kick off malware scans against those backups.
All right, small and medium enterprises are sometimes limited by their budgets for a full-scale 32110 recovery solution. What are the basics that they should prioritize on if cost was a severe limiter?
Like eliminating one of those, I would make sure that you have a copy that's off-site and immutable. You got to have a lifeline. I mean, we've seen it. The attackers are going to get into your system. They're going to wait till Labor Day weekend or whatever holiday, and then they're going to hit you, and they're going to delete all of your backups. We've seen it. They can get into these backup consoles and just take everything out. So if you have something that can't be touched, you still have a lifeline out there. So you got to budget for that. I mean, you might have a limited budget, but you still got to get a copy of your data off-site and keep it immutable.
All right, that brings us kind of the next question here. Can you provide some tactics around dealing with ransomware dwell times?
Sure. So, I mean, we're seeing average dwell time around 30 days. That's, you know, like I said before, they're gonna get into your systems and they're just gonna sit and idle until the right time to attack. You know, they're gonna harvest credentials, get deeper and deeper into all of the critical systems. So, I mean, how do you beat that, really? First, you got to not let them in, right? You got to have some type of defense in depth strategy to slow them down, not let them in. Get some threat detection tools in place that can tip you off when there's an anomalies, CPU spikes, or accounts doing things that they shouldn't be doing, or you know, accessing systems like on a weekend at midnight when you know that person wouldn't be working. Well, Bob, tell me again. The question was, how do you?
Where was it? Sorry, I'm trying to read other ones here. Can you provide some tactics around dealing with ransomware dwell times?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, a good defense in depth strategy to begin with But let's say they're in there and they've been sitting idle for a while. You need to go back before the attack, even if it's a compromised system, and try to clean the system off. So you can bring these systems up in an isolated environment, and run some scanning tools that can disable the attack, basically. So it's kind of a cleanup approach at that point, I think.
All right, we'll wrap up with one final question. There's plenty of questions here. Great Q&A, by the way. If we didn't get to your questions here today, again, the Recovery Point and the MVP team will have access, and we'll follow up with everyone after the webinar's ended. So final question, what is the process to get started with Recovery Point or MVP solutions?
Oh, great. I mean, you reach out to us. Our sales team will begin the conversation with you about we'd like to take a look at what your recovery time objectives or your recovery point objectives are, and then we start to build solutions based on what you're trying to achieve from the business needs. What is the business impact, and then we can build services that will cater to that requirement.
All right, wonderful. Any parting words here today, Jeff or Jay?
Just thank you. Thanks, Bob, for giving me the opportunity here to discuss ransomware. It's a big topic. We could talk for a long time, I'm sure, about all the things that are going out there. Thank you.
Yeah, same here. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who joined today. Really appreciate taking the time out to listen to us.
All right, wonderful. Thanks again, everyone, for your attendance here today. We hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. I'd like to personally thank Jeff and Jay for their time here today, as well as Recovery Point and MVP for sponsoring today's webinar. We will be emailing everyone the link to the recording. You may view that recording as frequently as you wish, or share it with your peers. If you have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Recovery Journal. Thank you again, and this now ends today's webinar. Thanks, everyone.